So, welcome back to the last Alliance Total War and to another battle replay I was given by Eryn and Anish, and this time we're going to be seeing, well, there are 4 players on the field, but we're going to be seeing 3 factions that we have not yet seen in the previous pitch battles that we have shown off. The blue team over here, which rather confusingly, that is the colour of the opposition side in Shogun 2, both are going to be the Kingdom of Anadune, which that represents our Pharazon's vision of the Kingdom of Numenor, so the Golden Empire marching onwards. We're going to be seeing our first look at the Elves today as well, with the Kingdom of Eryn Galen, of course being the Woodland Realm, and you can see they have a little bit of the Hattori going on with the fact that they can deploy in various locations across the map, which makes sense for a faction such as them with their movement. But we shall start off with the Kingdom of Rhovanion, which is the faction that Eryn and Anish himself is going to be playing as, and while they may be called the Rhovanion, as I'm sure you can see from their looks, this is a time before the Rohirrim were actually a thing, so you could look at them as being the proto-versions of them, much as the Karaka folk, as we saw in the previous 2 battle replays, are the inheritors of the Haladin and the ancestors of the Dunlanders, albeit I think the direct comparison to the Rhovanion here is a little bit more obvious because, of course, you know, they have a very set style in terms of what they are, but plenty of cavalry, of course, and we've seen how effective cavalry can be in the opening 2 battles, both in terms of cancelling one another out last time around and in the first one, how domineering it was. So this will mean that the Rhovanion ultimately is going to have a smaller set infantry force in most replays that we see, I'm sure. And it does mean that most forces facing off against them are going to be adopting a very defensive posture, given how effective units can be off the charge. We have the Northmen Company Lancers here again, good armour from the front of their horses, pretty well equipped as well. Very nice style, of course. This is the sort of visual style which a lot of people are big fans of, myself included. Unsurprisingly as well, horse archers will be making a pretty big impact on the way that the Rhovanion are going to be going about their business. The Northmen Company archers, again, dressed in similar levels of gear, but they're of course going to be more of a harassment style unit. We'll see how the Numenorians dig in and try and counterfire against this kind of unit, because horse archers in many a Total War games can be dealt with simply by putting yourself in a good defensive position and being able to return fire. Horse archers have a tendency to be smaller units after all, which is the trade-off for their superior manoeuvrability. We have some Northmen Feared Lancers here, a more entry-level cavalry unit, a little bit more scout-like in their nature. The Feared, of course, is a Anglo-Saxon word for levy troops, essentially, so certainly very fitting for the Rhovanion here, but even entry-level cavalry like this, thinking back to baseline Shogun 2, light cavalry was pretty damn effective at what it did anyway, so this is also going to be the sort of unit which I'm sure we'll see some good use, provided they can get some clean charges off. We'll carry on with the cavalry for the moment and talk about the infantry in just a moment. We have some Northern Frontiersmen, who are the horse archer variant of the Feared we just saw. Again, very similar level of equipment, though they carry a hunting bow on their back as well, so they're going to be able to join in with the skirmishing, though they, of course, even with their little smaller round shields that they have, are still going to be in a little bit of trouble, you would suggest, if there are some heavy Numenorian archers counter-firing them, but plenty of manoeuvrability, of course. In the centre here, we have Tira, company of the 1st Marshal. Will we see the General? Indeed, there they are. So obviously a big, heavier cavalry unit, this. And having a General in a cavalry unit, certainly from a campaign point of view, is always very effective, and it of course means that you have a very high-end unit that's also capable of dishing out a big amount of punishment very, very quickly. But the General also has to put themselves in harm's way to do that, so we'll see how eager Eryn is to commit his General to such things. And then a couple more of the Feared Lancers back here as well. I mean, between the Rhovanion and Eryn Lasglen, they're probably not going to have a huge amount of infantry on the field with which to set up long engagements with presumably the superior Numenorian infantry. But what they do have is going to need to get the job done late on, you would suggest, and we have the Northmen Berg Guard here, pretty well equipped, pretty damaging axemen, the sort of unit which can cause troubles from a damage perspective to many a high-end infantry unit on the opposition side. But of course, as is always the way with shock infantry like this, axemen in particular across many Total War games, they do tend to have a little bit of a discrepancy when it comes to their own defensive prowess, but they'll be hoping that their armour can do most of that for them, and those heavy blows will be enough to finish off the scary Numenorians on the other side of the field. I think this is, yeah, a full line of the Northmen Berg Guard as well, so not needing a shielded unit on the front here. Just in behind we have some Northmen Mark infantry as well, far more of an entry-level unit this of course, but just trying to pad out the numbers a little bit, because numbers of infantry in the late game may be the difference between victory and defeat after all. We have the Northmen Gird Guard in here as well. Looks to be a slightly more professional unit of shielded infantry, again wielding an axe in their offhand, however, their chosen choice of weapon, both one-handed and two-handed. Another unit of the Gird Guard as well, so no foot archers, but not really necessary when you have this amount of horse skirmishers. Now then, moving on to Eryn Galen, we have the Tawarwaith Beach Glaives. I don't know whether this unit, they just forgot to move it, but it doesn't really matter anyway, they can just march in step with the Rhovanion. I need to try and remember not to call them the Rohirrim, because that's not technically what they are. Beach Glaives though, you can see here, again, long weaponry. If you think about what the Naginata brought you in Shogun 2, that's very much the sort of thing that you're going to see here. As with this kind of elven unit though, lightweight in nature perhaps, Eryn Galen being more of this far-flung faction where you can deploy outside of your deployment zone by the looks of things, is going to be a factor. You know, that will come at a cost in other ways. Unsurprisingly, or I should say I would expect this sort of faction to be very, very strong at long ranges. Sindar Greenleaf archers here, again good looking armour in and amongst those green cloaks, but the damage that elven archers are going to be capable of doing is the sort of thing which will worry, I'm sure, even the plate-clad Numenorians, who are going to be doing their best to resist all of that damage which is going to be forthcoming. You can see as well that they are hidden as well, so Eryn Galen going to be one of those very awkward factions to fight against, I would suggest, but the Kingdom of Anadune have all of the excuse they need with all of that cavalry opposite them and the fact they don't know where the elves are to adopt a far more defensive posture. But we see here Arofa is going to be the Sindar Flower Crown Guard. Will we be able to see this individual? I mean, that must be the one. Only one without a hood on, but blending in with their unit quite nicely, and also having a spear and the shield as their secondary weapon. So I would expect all of these elven units to be perfectly capable of mucking in melee as well, and they will need to, of course. I've already mentioned how in terms of pure infantry the blue team today are going to have the edge. Sindar Greenleaf Glaives as well, you can see here again decent armour, and also I would expect them to be good in terms of finesse, good in terms of damage. Whether they'll be able to do the business against the extremely heavy duty Numenorians opposite them, we shall see. And then finally in this corner of the map, sequestered away as another ambush party, we have the Tawarwaith Headhunter. So it's the Tawarwaith, based on the level of armour they have, probably one tier below the Sindar Greenleaf units. And then we also have some more Headhunters, so again more archers, 3 units of them, so they can move in directly to potentially deal with this very set defensive position already. I don't know whether they're going to try and move forward to get on some higher ground. It's probably for the best if they do, just so they don't have to deal with you know, going into the elves and the Rhovanions projectiles while marching uphill. Kingdom of Anadune may be an all-new faction in general, but they do share an awful lot with the Kingdom of Numenor as well, as you would expect. They're effectively one and the same after all, but they do have some individual unique units between them. But the Numenorian pikemen are not one of those, of course. We've seen them already. Going to be a very effective frontline force for Anadune, and going to be very necessary here given the Rhovanion cavalry, which is going to be buzzing all around the battlefield today. They are going to be one of the main targets, you would suggest, for those horse archers and those elven foot archers, however. So we'll see how the Numenorians deal with that particular threat. Numenorian faithful of the Golden King naturally are a unique unit to Anadune in comparison to Numenor proper. Again, heavier unit of infantry here, more of an aggressive unit of infantry as well, wielding an axe in their offhand. Got that sort of mariner look to them as well, which is good. Over here we have our Pharazôn and his Golden Guard. So our Pharazôn here, you can see he stands out quite a bit, wielding a sword, unlike the rest of his unit, wielding those long spears and shields, but another very effective frontline unit, and also shielded, heavily armoured. They will be one of the targets, I'm sure, for all of those projectiles just trying to assassinate the Golden King himself, but again, this is the sort of unit which, in pure melee terms, probably has no equal on the field today, considering the fact that Eryn Galen have gone fully in for their archers more than anything else. Númenorian faithful of the Golden King are here. Númenorian heavy infantry. It's not too surprising to see that Anadune have gone for a lot of their polearm units, considering the amount of cavalry they expected to face, and Númenorian heavy infantry as well, very heavily armoured, heavily shielded, exactly the sort of thing that you would want against missile units as well. So again, it's going to be a case of trying to outlast the storm, I think, for Anadune, but surely if any faction can do that among the humans at the very least, it's going to be them. Númenorian Swordmasters, another very effective pure melee unit, so this is really going to come down to whether or not enough damage can be done to the Númenorians by the red team before it turns into a melee slog, because they've brought all of their heavy hitters really in terms of defensive prowess and, in this unit's case, in terms of offensive prowess as well. Very, very effective unit as well. More Númenorian Swordmasters. Interestingly enough, not seeing a huge amount in the way of archers, which means they are just going to have to sort of just sit there and hope that they can outlast, although actually I was lying, because they're all here, interestingly enough, setting up their wooden barricades. You can see here the Númenorian steel bowmen, the best of the Númenorian archers, heavily armoured, capable of getting involved in melee late on as well, but their main priority here is going to be counter-skirmishing both the horse archers of the Rhovanion and the foot archers of the elves. The other Númenorian army, we have the Númenorian faithful of the Golden King once again. Númenorian bodyguard, interestingly enough. So Ar-Pharazôn, only one of him is going to be on the field today, and one of his subordinates marching in step as part of the Númenorian bodyguard. They're more of a traditional sword and, well, tower shield unit, I guess you would suggest. Númenorian shock infantry, interestingly enough. And you can see here they're wielding a simple longsword, but again, a two-hander. Maybe not as show-stopping as the Númenorian Swordmasters, but they are going to offer you still a nice spike of damage in melee. And then many units of heavy infantry, so very clear what this army had in mind. Plenty of heavy shielded infantry to try and withstand the pressure that the red team are going to be putting on them. So, without further ado, let's get this show on the road, shall we, as Kingdom of Anadune start to shift their units. I mean, they may have set up these wooden barricades here, but they don't necessarily need to utilise them. I mean, they do have collision, which is interesting, so you can use them to try and shield yourself against cavalry as well, but yeah, I think it's definitely in the Númenorian interest to at least set up a position here in the middle, based on this map being one of those where you have the high ground right in the middle of the map, falls away at both flanks, and if you're going to set up a defensive position here, you need to at least make it so that the elevation is comparable. You've got to love the Númenorian style as well. Their plate armour stands them in very good stead in terms of their defensive abilities. I mean, the Númenorians may have an issue in gaining access to the centre of the map as easily as they would like, however, because the Rhovanion can move into position very quickly. They can set about the Númenorians with their horse archers very quickly. Immediately. All of the hollering from all of the troops already. The enemy. Well, you can see here immediately that the Northmen Company archers moving forward, and they do have a slight, however slight, terrain advantage still. I mean, the amount of damage they'll be able to do from the front against all of these heavy Númenorian troops remains to be seen. A few of them falling by the wayside here through sheer volume. Shooting circle, a Cantabrian circle being set up as well. We do have the Númenorian steel bowmen returning fire as well. I do wonder what the best choice of target is. I mean, you can see here it's almost like the Olympic symbol. You know, if you put a couple more loops on the bottom here with how these shooting circles are interlocking with one another, it does reduce their ability to be hit, but I do think that the Númenorians may wish to, they do move back now, they may wish to target the elves down more so than the horse archers, perhaps. You can see here immediately, unsurprisingly, the red team are going to be spreading their wings a little bit in this battle and using the mobility that they have. Again, it's not ideal for the Golden Empire. Ooh, hello. Northmen feared lancers charging maybe foolhardishly into the Númenorian pikemen. Northmen feared lancers charging forward once again. So it is the Rhovanion doing much of the work so far. They do get caught on the side of those Númenorian heavy infantrymen. I think they were trying to thread the needle and charge into some of the softer targets, or at least some of the targets without anti-cavalry capabilities like those heavy spears. Fair play to them though, charging in. Covering as well. Ooh, and actually managing to get a decent charge into, well, more of a bump really, into the Númenórean steel bowmen. They want to get out of melee with them quickly though, considering the two-handers that they are whipping out in melee as well. But I do like the fact they're charging in, doing damage with the horse archers as well. You can see this wing of the Númenórean army though, immediately going to be moving towards Eryn, Galen and trying to force some sort of engagement, which is all well and good, but it does mean they're going to be separated from their ally. It means that it's going to give the Rhovanians cavalry that little bit more impetus throughout the field. Númenórean swordmaster taking some hits as well. I mean, damage being done by the horse archers, but it's not crippling. Númenórean shock infantry taking a charge from the feared lancers as well, but steel bowmen arrows are the response. Still more horse archers squeezing in as well, so trying to follow their allies here, at least give them a little bit of support from the rear. The Rhovanian infantry ready to strike at a moment's notice as well, with their feared lancers in close proximity as well. Frontiersmen, steel bowmen going after the feared lancers and getting some decent hits on them as well. Rhovanion thinking, I think, about going after the other Anadune army. I mean, this is the problem though, the elves can simply move back, although they are a little bit far flung here. The elves are going to need to send over some of their other infantry to support, I think, and try and pull the golden legions apart. Although the only truly golden unit is our Pharazon and his personal guard, which makes some sense. Damage still being done. Over here, meanwhile, Northmen Berg Guard getting involved in a scrap with some Númenórean heavy infantry. Although the Númenóreans managing to surround them for the most part, just one unit of the Berg Guard. And with these odds, it's not looking particularly good for them. They're going to need to get more of these heavy axemen in here if they hope to win the melee engagement. They are getting some support from the horse archers just in behind them, including the company of the First Marshal, an elite horse archer unit. I'm a little bit surprised that more of the infantry isn't making an appearance, given they do have reinforcements readily available. Some feared lancers, meanwhile, on their own out here, continuously getting battered by the steel bowmen. Damage is consistently being done, and you can see here, again, the feared lancers charging into the shock infantry as well. One of the better choices of target, not if they stay in melee though. That damage, they're winning for the time being, but that won't last given their numbers. Now sweeping forwards again. Meanwhile, again, these Rhovanian cavalry units, and this is something I'm surprised didn't happen a little bit sooner. Northman Company Lancers, some of the stronger Rhovanian cavalry units, managing to get a rear charge into the Númenórean pikemen, although not getting any kills. Simply bumping into the enemy rather than actually getting a clean charge off, and that has been a bit of a theme so far. Meanwhile, Eryn Galen continuing to flee. I mean, now the Greenleaf Glaives forming up a front line, and the Elven Archers going to start to fire away Númenórean faithful of the Golden King. Several units of them, of course, going up against these Greenleaf Glaives. The other wing of the Elven army, however, is over here. They are dealing, or helping the Rhovanion deal with this other Númenórean army, so this is a very chaotic affair already. Missiles being loosed. Getting a bit of friendly fire here though on the Northmen Berg Guard, as well as the steel bowmen also firing in. Again, those shields should protect them. I mean, losing current combat here. Again, unsurprisingly, perhaps the Númenóreans having a clear edge over the Rhovanion in sheer melee terms. Trying to use those axes to good effect. And I mean, they're going to be doing damage here though, and those horse archers are continuing to just pick away at the numbers that the Númenóreans have. The Berg Guard trying to earn their pay. There's also the lower tier infantry, which the Rhovanions still have held in reserve. More cavalry now. Horse archers. Moving as a consistent unit has certainly helped the forces of the red team here. Consistent missile damage. It was always going to be a battle that came down to that, really. If the missiles can do the business, it's going to be difficult for the Númenóreans to come out with a victory, but if they can't do enough damage quickly enough with their bows, then the Númenórean numbers and quality in melee should be enough to get the job done the old-fashioned way. The elves concerned by the enemy numbers nearby. I mean, doing a good job at holding the line for the moment. I mean, they're punching through in places here, the Númenóreans. Again, Shogun 2's animations are significantly better than some of the games that came after. And that definitely adds a lot to battles like this. Númenórean Swordmasters taking pretty consistent hits there from all of those missiles. Elven missiles as well, so the damage will be consistent, but the Swordmasters managing to withstand for the time being. That plate armor definitely doing its job, but is this going to be enough to continue? Meanwhile, over here in the trees, it does look as though the Númenóreans are still hanging on in this particular melee engagement. But the Berg Guard, I mean, it is a bit of a chaotic mob fight over here. I think the difference is, though, that horse archer support is ultimately going to mean, as much as the Rhovanion are going to take losses over here under the trees, it should still be an engagement that they come out the better of. Friendly fire from both the steel bows and the horse archers has been a factor here, though. Númenórean shock infantry trying to hold the line against the other portion of the elven army that deployed in the corner. Casualties sustained during the battle, however. I mean, over here, interestingly enough, is maybe the one example where the Númenóreans do have a bit of a ranged advantage. There are those Tuawaith in the background over there, but is the cavalry going to move in? I mean, I guess not. The infantry for the time being has to be enough to do the business. The elves, though, proving a little bit lightweight in the face of the Númenórean resistance for the time being, but how scattered the Númenórean infantry is concerning. If they were able to form up a united front and really hold a line down against the cavalry and archer pressure, that probably would have been the way our Pharazôn and his boys would have chosen to do it. As it is, though, that hasn't quite panned out. They're going to have to try and make do. Steel Bowman, by the looks of things, out of ammunition, so now getting involved in the melee fight as well. More arrows ripping through, however, from the Tuawaith. And then Field Lancers now getting involved as well, seeing an opportunity to charge in. Again, we've seen cavalry already be such an important factor in these battles. Attacked in the rear. And just the sheer amount of cavalry the Rhovanion have would suggest that they fancy their chances there. The elves continuing to fire away into the steel bowmen. Steel bows in terms of their equipment and in terms of their armour now, though. Northmen Berg Guard moving forward, so the rest of the Rhovanion infantry now moving in to interrupt this arch line. Any ammunition they had left is now no longer going to be usable unless they can fight their way out of here quickly, but I doubt that. I mean, these are ultimately archers at the end of the day. These Rhovanion troops should be enough to at least hold their attention for long enough that the rest can transpire. Yeah, and the Númenóreans now. Combination of the Rhovanion cavalry and infantry coming to the assistance of the elves should be enough to finish this engagement in their favour. Over here, meanwhile, cavalry being warded off, and over here it is looking as though the Númenóreans will be victorious in the corner. Our Pharazôn moving forth with pretty much an entire Númenórean force did come over here, to be fair, so you would expect it. But the elves being engaged, kept at arm's length by those Númenórean long spears, pushed into the corner. That Yari wall or spear wall formation in Shogun 2 always so effective. Faithful of the Golden King thinking of charging in, but then thinking better of it. Heavy infantry exhausted, still getting hit. I mean, as much as they will be victorious over here, it is costing them. Those horse archers consistently pumping arrows into the Númenórean units. Faithful of the Golden King dealing with these beach glaives, doing their best to hold out here. I mean, they could post up in the corner, I suppose, when all is said and done. This engagement over here already successful, so the Rhovanion going to start to move all of their other units. They should probably regroup with the units over here, finish the Numenorians off here in the more central portions of the map, and then they can regroup and try and wipe them away from the corner engagement. I mean, they might even be able to arrive before the elves in the corner completely succumb. If that's the case, then I wouldn't rate the Numenorian chances particularly highly. The Berg Guard alongside the shielded Gird Guard, able to finish off all of those steel bowmen. Still some faithful of the Golden King over here, far more of a worthy foe to all of these infantry units, but getting attacked in the rear now. The North Guard out of ammunition in terms of their bows, but pulling out a two-handed axe in melee. That's certainly something we've seen from the Woodland Realm in other mods. Stakes are here as well, though. Definitely the sort of thing which the cavalry has had to navigate, the crisscross of these stakes as well. Pretty nasty little position, this. But yeah, unsurprisingly, these faithful of the Golden King, I do like their look, I have to say, very thematic for the island nation of Numenor. But yeah, they're not going to last too much longer, you would suggest, but it's not a huge force. I mean, in all fairness, the Numenorians have actually managed to fight in a pretty grim situation against the elves over here to a pretty good standard. They may yet have what it takes. Feared Lancers charging in, having to go up against the Numenorian bodyguard, so the general, I think... No, that's not him. The general fighting back to back. I mean, as you would expect, a general's bodyguard unit is always going to have a certain level of quality. Cavalry just sitting in melee now. Further up as well, this Numenorian heavy infantry also doing the same, only with their spears, of course, they represent an even graver threat to the lighter riders of the Rhovanion that are trying to help get the job done over here. More of that Rhovanion infantry is needed, the Mark infantry marching in as well. Really fighting back to back here. Concerned, attacked in the rear. Bodyguard still confident though. Looking over here meanwhile, still the shooting circles. I mean, if they can draw the engagements out into a more open field one, and interestingly enough a charge in there by the Northmen Company Lancers. Again, a very dangerous cavalry unit indeed, heavier in nature than the riders trying to influence the fight across the way, but there's still enough polearms over here. There's heavy infantry. I mean, in particular, our Pharazon is going to be a real problem if it comes down to only cavalry charges. Shielded long spear unit, very Greek in terms of the kind of phalanx they are. Sindar Greenleaf archers, and Arofa is here as well with those telltale shields and glaives in melee. But not built for pure melee combat, perhaps like our Pharazon. I mean, it's going to take a little while to get the job done over here, but as long as the Numenorians can continue to commit units to the front here. There's Numenorian pikemen in there as well, so it's a double spear wall, really. The elves backed into a corner, very much so. Few arrows coming in, ripping through the trees. I mean, it's a huge amount of cavalry that's out here, out of the cover of the trees, so I mean the Numenorians are very much stuck now in this engagement, whether they like it or not. But having posting up in the corner probably is the best way of doing things. Some cavalry moving a little closer, Northmen Company Lancers. Are they going to try and get a point-blank charge? Maybe. There's actually a charge over on the other side. I mean, it's more a case of trying to surgically strike where polearms are not, but the only real choice of target then is the faithful of the Golden King. Meanwhile, over here, it is looking finally as though the Numenorians have succumbed. I do think that the elves and the Rhovanion should be able to get over the line from here. Headhunters revealing themselves, a bit of cavalry left. But for the most part over here, it is going to be the units on foot. North Guard, Mark infantry as well, so some of the weaker Rhovanion troops, but still they will take whatever they can get at this point. Exhausted as they are, everyone will be required, all hands to the pump. If the Númenóreans, after all, can post up, they could prove to be a real problem. I think it's the sheer amount of cavalry that the Rhovanion have left, though, which makes this probably an unwinnable situation for them. Also, if they can get some infantry over here to help attack from the other side, because one thing as well, these elves of Eryn Galen have managed to hold on in a situation they wouldn't like to have found themselves in those initial stages for quite a long time. I mean, part of the issue may be that the Númenóreans are pretty reliant on these long spear units, which will do the business, but it will take them a little while to do the damage that they want to, and time is not a luxury they really have any longer. Rofa doing his thing. Hard to keep track of the general, maybe less so our Pharazon because of his full face helmet. And still, a consistent thing throughout the battle as well has also been the skirmishers, in particular the horse archers. Like, individual, like, quick damage has not really been what they've been doing, but they've been constantly hitting the Númenóreans, constantly causing minor casualties here and there, and of course that death by 1,000 cuts philosophy is definitely how things tend to work when you're utilising horse archers in any total war. Some of the Númenórean pikes still trying to do the business. Cavalry poking in from the side where they can as well, just trying to hasten matters. I mean, the cavalry charges have been flowing in this battle, but they haven't been as devastating as we saw in that initial battle, I think. So the Númenóreans here more well prepared for them, but again, maybe a little bit too rigid. It's always going to be difficult if your main strength is heavy infantry and forcing an engagement and winning through strength of arms, and the opposition have the mobility, they have the ranged advantages, and then they also have the shock advantages in terms of cavalry. That's a lot of different tools that your opponent can then use against you. You can only really win the battle in one way, whereas your opponent has more options. Which, if you're going double Númenor, heavy infantry is how they're going to do things, I suppose. Our Greenleaf Archers starting to rout. Some of these elves starting to give up the ghost here in the later game. Bit of that friendly fire from the Rhovanion horse archers is probably not helping matters. Arofa trying to slip the net, really. Succeeding for the most part as well. This will allow freer use of those horse archer projectiles still. Still arrows being loosed. And all of those reinforcements have pretty much arrived. Some of the Mark infantry and the Tuarwaith units still waiting. At this point it could just be a case of doing as much damage as possible with these archers, and then moving in with everything they have to try and squash them underfoot. Númenórean numbers, after all, starting to look.
We are running out of ammunition. It would be best if we concentrate on one target.
Running low on ammo, so not too much more in the form of arrows that they can use, but every one proving to be useful here. A few more of these Faithful of the Golden King falling with each volley that comes in. Arofa managing to get out of there, but the Númenóreans trying to chase them down. Loss of a general after all. Shogun 2's morale mechanics could be made use of here. Oh, there's one elf well in behind enemy lines. Our Pharazon's still 85 of his unit remaining, but involved in this slog for a little while. Still these shooting circles. Ammunition maybe running low, but they've certainly got their money's worth out of all the arrows they brought to the field today, the Rhovanion. that manoeuvrability has certainly been of help. The Númenóreans splitting up has certainly meant that the ability to cross ground quickly from all of this cavalry has certainly seen its use. Rhovanion was able to pivot to helping the elves here in the corner with cavalry throughout the engagement pretty quickly, which would not have been an option if they only had foot archers, really. They would have had to have made that decision very early, otherwise that window of opportunity would have closed, but tactical flexibility with the horse archers. I mean, the Númenóreans now also having to break the tree line, really, which is not going to go particularly well for them, you would suggest. Trying to use as much of their ammunition on Ar-Pharazôn and his boys as possible. Is Ar-Pharazôn still alive even? Yes, he is. You can see him there. His helmet plume and his sword, as opposed to the rest of his men carrying those long spears. Northern frontiersmen, maybe out of ammunition. And now all of these Númenórean units starting to break. Númenórean pikemen also broken. Only unit that Númenor have left, perhaps unsurprisingly, are Ar-Pharazôn and his boys. And they're broken. And that is that. There we have it. Tactical flexibility wins the day, I would suggest. And I think, well, I think we'll end the battle and go into the endgame splash screen and have a look there first and foremost. But I think what we can safely say in this case is that if Númenor were going to have success, they needed to be unified in a strong defensive position. The fact they split up, it may have been, to be fair, the Númenórean player did see an opportunity to try and chase the elves down, and the elves didn't have the battle that they would have wanted, I don't think. They got chased around all over the place, and it is what it is. Having a look at the unit statistics here, I mean, 142 kills. I mean, the Sindar Greenleaf Archers did do very, very well. I don't know how many of those kills would have been in melee, though, because they did get engaged surely before they managed to use up all of their ammunition. So again, it does go to show that Elven units, as you would always expect, are going to be the kind of units that are going to be able to, you know, really do a good job in melee, in comparison to some of the other factions where their archers are very much going to be the equivalent of what the Bow Ashigaru were, which were useless in melee for the most part. Tuawaith Headhunters, Tuawaith Northguard did very well again, those archers. So maybe the Elven arrows over the long haul did do the business, but over here with the Rhovanion you can see excuse me, Northmen Company archers break 100 kills each. I mean, horse archers are going to do damage pretty slowly, but it was the manoeuvrability more so than the kills. I think their ability to reinforce the elves, and the elves fighting backs to the wall in the corner managed to do good damage at range, it seems, and in melee later on. A little bit of help. Northmen Berg Guard, I mean, considering the level of infantry they were going up against, those are pretty good numbers. You have to consider the fact that, you know, Númenórean heavy infantry, all of that sort of thing, was their opponent. And we saw the Berg Guard struggling in some engagements, but when they were able to group up with numbers, with the support of those horse archers in the background, they were starting to do the business. And yeah, over the long haul, I mean, the Lancers were able to get some good kills, especially towards the end when those gaps started appearing. Not as easy as they would have wanted the charges to be, especially considering the armies did split up. There was a moment where maybe the cavalry could have been truly devastating, but to Númenor's credit, they did manage to shut the door on that. Girdguard did quite well as well, actually 200, but that was during the cleanup operation more than anything else, I would think. Over here, Ar-Pharazôn, 192 kills, which all of them being on elves means that, you know, they're all going to be very worthwhile indeed. The Faithful of the Golden King, Sword Masters. It's difficult really because for the most part the Númenóreans were subject to trying to absorb punishment from afar before they were able to get into melee and start really doing what they do best, which is bullying opponents up close. But on this occasion they had to really bide their time and wait. I mean, 0 kills on a unit is never a good thing to see. 11 is also quite low on these Númenórean pikemen, but again, it's not really surprising. They're a unit that's unshielded. One of the first choices of target they're going to be for missile units, and they can only get involved in melee. And so once the engagement was forced, a couple of them did very well in the corner, but the rest very much focused down. And then the other army, Númenórean Bodyguard, fought to the bitter end and did quite well at doing that, but by the time they were getting involved in that sort of thing, it was already a losing fight, really. Heavy infantry, again, 0 kills on a unit of heavy infantry is no good. That is definitely not the sort of return you want to see, but plenty of units getting 100. That's the only outlier, really. The rest of this army did really quite well, but a lot of it was also going up against the more numerous wing of the Elven army in the Tuar weights, and also a bit more of the Rhovanion infantry was also facing off against this army as well, so the higher numbers does make a good amount of sense. So yes, big thank you to Eryn and Anish for sending another battle replay my way. Long may these continue, because I am enjoying being able to show off another submod on a more regular basis like this. I have been thinking as well about starting to dive into some of the factions, maybe doing a little bit of a faction overview video series in this mod, so do let me know if that's the sort of thing that you would like to see going forward, and I'll try and fold it into the regular schedule, because I don't know whether a channel update will have already happened before this video or whether one will follow shortly after, but there is a channel update that needs to be said, because there is more news really, and this time it's going to be a good thing for the channel. It's certainly not a negative thing, but yeah, it should be a good thing for the channel. So hopefully we can start to expand outwards a little bit more again, and we can get off the survival mode that the channel has been in and sort of just going through the motions for a little while. Hopefully we can start to branch back out a little bit. But that's more a matter for the channel update video and not for a ramble at the end of one of these battle replay videos. So yeah, big thank you to Eryn once again. Big thanks to all the players for being a part of this battle replay and allowing me to show it. Hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you'll join me for whatever is next.